Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast, presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Chip Fridrich, will talk Vandy baseball. Chip appears on the guest line, sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Now, on to our interview with Chip Fridrich. Chip Fridrich joins us. Vanderbilt's got another series win in the book. Since we talked last, it slaughtered North Alabama and saw its non-conference RPI and strength of schedule take an absolute tumble by playing that game, but did get a win. Chip, thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Chris. Good to hear from you again and good to be here on the pod. That North Alabama team wasn't very good, and that happens midweek. You know, I was talking to a friend, former player, and I've thought about this in the past, but never really have, expressed it here. These midweek games early in the season, when you're playing in February and you're playing these teams midweek, it's a lot different than playing midweek games in April. And the reason being is because early on, you've got these teams that are pitching their aces midweek. They don't have conference games to worry about on the weekend. They're playing weekend games like you are, but they set their sights on knocking off, the top team. So you'll get a Wednesday pitcher, you'll get their ace in February or early March. When it comes to April, early May, they too have conference games, so they have to adjust accordingly, and you're not getting their best shot. And I think that's what you kind of see that in the records. You see a lot of upsets early in February and March, although you did see Elon. Did Elon beat Wake the other day? I mean, that was kind of unusual midweek. So
Elon's pretty good, though.
Yeah, Elon's a good team. Elon's a good program. And Wake's has kind of been top 5 all year. But yeah, it's just you're seeing that happen in the RPI and their strength schedule falls and all those categories. But that's part of it. But all in all, last week, good week. You win 2 out of 3, and you don't moan about that at all. If you're in this league, you just keep stacking conference series wins. And I mean, if you win 2 out of 3 in this league, you're probably the SEC champions of the regular season. And I think exposed some stuff last week with maybe the starting pitching depth. Not that it's horrible, but you get Carter Holton sitting out, and that kind of bumps everybody down a couple notches as far as who to go to first in the pen and who's your starter, and made some uncharacteristic errors. But hey, we're not going to complain about winning 2 out of 3 on the road against a team in Missouri that's improved, and all in all, it's a good week, and all things point forward to this weekend where you got a big 6 game. You want to take them one series at a time, but with South Carolina and UT back to back, it's going to be a very tough 6 games, and you want to come out there with some victories.
As someone who has spent his week absolutely poring over SEC stats of every team of every sort, I still think without Holton, they probably got the best pitching staff in the league. And probably the next best is coming to town this weekend.
Right. South Carolina's, they've got some injuries themselves. I saw where they've got their number 2 guy, I think, is not starting. They're going to, so
Noah
every
Hall,
team's,
he's out.
Yeah, Hall.
Yeah.
He's not going to be, he's going to be unavailable. I watched the Mark Kingston press conference this morning, and he's out. So this part of the year, you're getting towards the midway point, and everybody's got bumps and bruises and ailments, and Noah Hall, who was 5-1 on the season's not going to pitch this weekend. One of their better pitchers, so they're going to have to. There's 2. They're scrambling as well, but they've got a good staff. South Carolina has you've any sport, whether it's basketball in the non-conference slate, you've got baseball in the non-conference slate, where you get some confidence and you build some wins. You look at what they've done, which is a team rolling in here. It's 29-4, and they didn't play they always play Clemson, but they played some teams early on that were in nowhere comparison to what Vanderbilt played and going on the neutral sites. I mean, they took care of the Penns and Queens College and UMass Lowell and scoring 20 runs and 17 runs, and their margins of victory early were really, really impressive. They weren't playing anybody, but they did stack some wins. But what that does is it gets your team, your young team especially, confident, and the bats going, and the crowds start coming out to the games, and they've almost won 30 games. However you want to slice it, this team is coming in. They're nationally ranked. They're 29-4, and it's going to be a big test for Vanderbilt. That this team hits really well. They a lot of power numbers in their lineup, and some familiar faces that will coming in here. Gavin Cassis, who's having a heck of a year with 15 home runs, but he doesn't even lead the team in home runs. Ethan Petrie leads with 16.
Oh, he's phenomenal.
So they've got some power numbers that are impressive, and they're going to be hard to deal with this weekend.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me about South Carolina, if you're Vanderbilt, is those guys hit a ton of home runs, and there are days where the ball tends to get out. And oh, by the way, you've got a number 3 guy who's been tremendous, but he does give up some fly balls. I'm very interested to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, that park of theirs, I mean, they play the majority of their games at home, and I don't know what about it. It's not a shallow park. It kind of has some area in the corners and then it goes out deep, but the ball tends to launch out of there. And of course, you got to have the ability to launch it too. But having 4 of their players in double figures and home runs at this point of the season, I don't care, who you are. You still got to have the power to get it out. And you look at Vanderbilt on the contrary. We don't have anybody in double digits in home runs. The top being R.J. Schreck with 8, and they've got 4 in double digits, 16, 15 in those numbers, 12 and another. So pretty impressive, and a little contrast. And we'll just have to see which way the wind's blowing out this weekend. The Hawk can sometimes have its wind tunnels, as I call them, themselves, and we'll just have to see how the weather plays into it. But impressive numbers by the Gamecocks. They're a team that all the success that they had on the national level for that 3-year run that they did was incredible. And then they sort of went through a dry period here. And even Kingston in his tenure he's not this year. He went to a regional his first year with the Gamecocks, but then you had the COVID year mixed in there. But he's a guy who coached at Illinois State and then came to South Florida for 2015, 16, 17, and took them to 2 regionals during that, and then took the Carolina job in 2018, took them to a super the first year, and then they went 2 years on a little dry spell. You had the COVID year in 2020, and then took them to the regional in 21, and then last year they were under 500. So it has been up and down for him, but the faithful there that follow that team, the following that they have throughout the state of South Carolina and locally there in Columbia, their field is incredible, their stadium, and things are, they've rejuvenated that thing, and that happens when you win 29 games at this point in the season.
That's an elite team. I will say they did pile up some power numbers against the soft underbelly of the schedule, which Vanderbilt really didn't do. Of course, Vanderbilt was also playing UCLA in the Big 12 and the Big 10 while Carolina was playing UMass Lowell or whoever. And I don't say that to slight Carolina. It's just some context. Because, again, I think this is an elite team. I think it's a top 5 team nationally. I think it's going to be one heck of an entertaining series.
Yeah, and they they themselves have gone through. They had LSU last week and only got to play 2. And I remember on the podcast last week, I said, we're going to really find out where they stack up as a team. They only got to play 2 games. But they themselves have, Vanderbilt got us this weekend in 3 games, and they got to go to Florida. But we can sit here and talk about the proverbial gauntlet that everybody has to go through. I mean, Vanderbilt has this game this weekend, these 3. They got Tennessee next weekend for 3. So everybody, you can just forget it. This league is so tough and balanced on generally that you're not going to have any cakewalks, and you're eventually going to have, as Tennessee has this weekend. Tennessee has to go to Fayetteville and play 3 games, and then next week they got to host us. So it is definitely no weeks off in this league, and Carolina has got just as many record that anybody does.
I want to backtrack a little bit to the midweek because there was something that happened that I wanted to get into. Did you get a chance to watch Colton Regen pitch?
I did. I did watch. I did get to watch him pitch this week, and that was one of those games that kind of gets some guys who haven't pitched at their first action, especially when it's 14-2.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching. I'm not expecting much because here's a kid, his second year on campus. This is the first time he's seen action in a game, in game 33 of his second year on campus, and it's in a 12-run blowout or whatever. And I'm watching him throw, and it's 96, 97. He's got a breaking ball that's working. He's working fast. I'm like, what? Where's this guy been? Has this been a recent development? Is there something else going on?
It's just an excess of riches, Chris, that you got guys throwing upper 90s, and that was the first inning that they've seen. I mean, there are kids on this roster, and looking the other day, that haven't even played. I mean, look at, and Cassis, and the situation with Cassis, which we can get into. I mean, what the year he is having, but he's just a kid who came in highly touted, couldn't get on the field. And, he wanted in this era of the portal and easy transfers and departures, he went to a place that, found a spot for him, whether I'm sure he had to earn it and wasn't guaranteed anything, but he has certainly paid dividends. And, in the press conference, Mark Kingston said, he was asked how he was approach that he was going to have with Gavin. And he said, he's a Gamecock now, and I'm sure there'll be some emotions going back to Nashville, but he's going to have to just play it like, get those emotions out early and play the game. But man, it's just in this day and age, especially the elite programs, I've said all along, I told someone last week, if I were a coach at Samford, Austin Peay, Western Kentucky, Davidson, some of these mid-majors, I would just have someone on my staff monitor the Gavin Cassis of the world. Of course, Cassis goes to South Carolina, so that's a little different. But just monitor these SEC and ACC programs, your top ones, and watch the guys who aren't getting the at-bats, who aren't getting the playing time, the pitches, and not getting the innings. Because, I mean, if you're throwing upper 90s and you're Colton Reed, I mean, that kid, case in point, local kid, Mount Juliet area. But, you wonder if he's got those intangibles and that ability, he's probably going to want to play. He's probably want to get in action sooner than the 32nd or third game of the season. And again, I would just sit there and watch those numbers if I were a coach and build my roster. That's what Austin Peay's done. I think I told you they had 18 new players this year. And while that's available and it's legal, but, there's not many people. Once I've said this before, when I played, there were very few people who threw over 90. We had a couple people, 3 or 4, and then most of them were at LSU. It was low 90s, but upper 90s is way different. It's way different look to the batter, and that's impressive. So, yeah, it was interesting to see. Boy, he came off the field. He was fired up and energetic, and he got – the team met him. So it was a good success story, and maybe he'll get some more chances.
Yeah, I think it was that a slider or a changeup he was throwing? I can't remember now. Because the notes I had from preseason was the slider was more game ready than the changeup.
Yeah, I think it was more of a hard slider that he was throwing, but it was downhill. I mean, when watching the review,
it was
big reach back, and so maybe this kid gets a chance. You have to capitalize when you're on a loaded staff and an elite program. If you're going to get your chances, you have to capitalize on them. And when you do, you get the ball perhaps in another situation. Tim Corbin mentioned last week in his pregame that, we're going to have some people who are going to get some action this week. Patrick Riley got in last week. He hadn't thrown in a weekend in a long, long time. Definitely not an SEC weekend yet. And he threw a couple batters, maybe 2, and got his chance, got in and out of there. But you get the ball back if you do well. But if you have to, when you get the ball and you get the call in the bullpen, you have to be ready. And we saw that. We've seen that a couple times in this pitching staff in the last couple years, that kid goes out there and performs well and he gets another opportunity and builds on it. And that could be the case with some of these guys. But you just forget about, Dukanich hadn't pitched in how long? A month? You forget about that kid, and he's a talented arm.
Horn hadn't pitched in a month until,
Right. And so, you're starting to get some guys back. I know Dukanich pitched in the pen, supposedly got some work this past week or this week and last week through a bullpen session. But, that's a talented arm. And he's only thrown 6 1/3 all season. So you get some people back and you get some people who are sidelined, and you got to just balance it out. And hopefully by May that everybody will be back in the rotation, at least in your stable of pitchers that you can go to.
Yeah, they've got, Holton, Hunter, Futrell speaks for itself. Maldonado speaks for itself. Leboki's been more good than bad. Dukanich, they thought Dukanich was maybe the 4th most valuable pitcher on their staff coming into the year.
Right.
Which that's a pretty significant piece. Schultz gave a better inning than he's given. I'm still not sure about that. When Cunningham has kind of come back down to earth a little bit more recently, but they still got Grayson Moore when he's healthy. I don't know what the deal is there. They still got Ginther, who they can use for a couple of batters. Jack Anderson is a guy that can eat an inning or two in a spot when you need it. Grayson Carter's a midweek starter. I don't know how much you see him in the postseason. Horn really looks like a usable piece right now. J.D. Thompson, I think there's been a little bit more there with him than they thought they'd get coming in. I don't know. And again, I'm looking at everybody in the SEC and the numbers they're putting up, and theirs are so far ahead of everybody else's right now.
Yeah, you mentioned J.D. Thompson. That's a kid who's almost like Colton Regen, who just got his opportunity a little bit earlier than he did, and he was given the ball and threw well in that. I think it was that 16-inning game a couple weeks ago. Was that the Evansville game? I think he got in some action. It turned to him, so he could be a lefty. He could get some people out. So up and down the lineup, and only Dukanich. He was a guy who was getting the ball midweek early on, first couple games in those midweek games. So they get those kids back and keep everybody else healthy, then I feel good about it. But it's just an excess of riches when you got that many. And we've talked about Maldonado only throwing 17 innings so far this year because he hadn't needed to. When he comes in, it's usually to get 6 outs, maybe sometimes only 3 outs. And, it just, he keeps continuing to be steady. Maldonado, steady presence with 18 strikeouts and 17 innings.
What did you make? And of course, I wasn't there, and Saturday was crazy. I was getting ready for the spring game, doing some other stuff, and so my attention to detail was lacking, and so it might have been mentioned somewhere on a post-game show or a broadcast. But what was the deal with Maldonado not being in the lineup that final game in Columbia?
I don't know that. I thought he would definitely. Are you talking about not getting the ball earlier than he did, or? No,
I'm sorry, wrong Maldonado. Chris was not in the starting lineup because they went Espinal behind the plate and Bulger at DH.
I'm not sure. That one kind of, that was interesting to me, but I didn't have any info or about that. That kid has been steady the entire season as a freshman and playing well beyond his years, but not sure if I was just giving somebody another opportunity or not, but I didn't think anything about it than what happened. And, he was back in the lineup against North Alabama. He went 1 for 3, but I didn't pick up on any reasoning behind that or not.
Yeah, I hadn't either. Corbin's gotten some criticism for keeping Bulger in that cleanup spot. I don't know that that's completely unwarranted. I might even have him in the lineup. I think I would have him in the lineup somewhere. I just don't know if that's the spot to hit him. Your thoughts on that one? This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. One topic of conversation has been Jack Bolger and where he's hitting, that it's too high in the order. What are your thoughts on that? Because he's been hitting cleanup for a while now, and Jack's having a good year, but I don't know that it's hitting cleanup in this offensive environment kind of year.
Yeah, that's one that is batting 228 of the regulars. He's at the bottom of the pile. He had the at the beginning of the season, that little stretch where he didn't play particularly well, and Espinal got in the lineup, and then Bolger had his breakout against Belmont midweek, and since then has maintained his position behind the plate. And then you see Espinal catching the midweek game against North Alabama and hit one off the fence. When Espinal gets it and gets a hold of the baseball and barrels it up, he shows his talent. He also had a couple good throws down to second base. Again, it was Northern Alabama, but I had that highlighted on my stat sheet this week, is wondering how long they're going to keep up with that and whether they're going to platoon or do something differently, because of the regulars, again, he's hitting 228 and he's 50 points below. He's 50 points below the eighth guy, as far as if you take the 9 regulars, and that's, we're not getting into danger area below the Mendoza line, but it's you're at 228 and you need to get better at that. So, yeah, and whether you move him out, Chris, you move him to a different part of the lineup, I think maybe it's time for that. I can understand the criticism. Like to have a guy with a little more punch in there, and perhaps you could see that this weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I got my whole runs created formula for everybody throughout all the games, and here's how it goes. Shrek is creating right now 14.4 runs per 27 outs, and it goes Maldonado 10.9, Bradfield 10.7, Espinal surprisingly 9.2. I think that's a little overachieving, but the number is what it is. Polk 8.8, Diaz 8.8, Austin 7.6, Nolan 7.3, Vastine 6.7, and Bolger 6.2. So he is the least productive hitter of the regulars, although, again, that does factor in a slow start.
Yeah, and when those numbers, that speaks for itself. I mean, not only in the batting average, but what you're getting there. So I'm not saying take him out of the lineup, but I think that's that 4 spot where you're getting that extra at bat from where you're batting, and in the order from 1 through 9. That's a pretty important spot, and you could very well see, as I said, this weekend they kind of tinker with that, especially with the arms that South Carolina has.
Maldonado is also hitting 395, 480, 721 in the league.
Right. Yeah, he seems to. Chris Maldonado is not afraid of SEC weekend pitching. I tell you that much. At least the ones he's seen. Now, we've talked about this. If anybody's gotten a break the first couple weeks of the season for the first 9 games, playing 3 of the teams that are maybe the weaker pitching staffs in the league currently, especially with Ole Miss's having the arm injuries that they've had, but he does not shy away from the weekends, and really that's where he's done a lot of his damage, surprisingly, with his being a freshman.
Yeah, Bolger in the league is hitting 250, 339, 405. Best three hitters in the league by far have been Maldonado. I just ran off his stats. Shrek has hit 404, 500, 851. That's on base. Excuse me, batting average, on base, and slugging. And Bradfield's really picked it up. He's gone 381, 559. That's incredible, and 738 in SEC games.
Those are some daunting numbers for sure. And, you talk about Mark Kingston was asked this week about, and everybody seems to dwell on how Vanderbilt did early in the season compared to what they were doing now. They were at the bottom of the league, and now they're at the top of the league in hitting. And what was the transformation? Kingston mentioned cold weather climate, colder weather climate, perhaps, or hitting, not catching up to the pitching, so on and so forth. But boy, that transformation came quickly. And it was all about, what was it, a month ago, midweek when it all started. We talked about how
the Belmont game.
There were games, the Belmont game at Sounds Park, and then everything kind of just exploded after that. So I can understand it's a head scratcher for a lot of teams when you're looking at it and trying to see what the true numbers are. But you got to go with what's happened as of late in conference play for your kind of measuring stick, and that's what everybody's going to go with.
Yeah, that game was exactly a month ago. We're doing this on the 13th. That was March the 13th, and they've been on the heater ever since. Now, Missouri did slow them down a bit, but that's a hitter's park, or excuse me, that's a pitcher's park. At least that's what the D1 baseball guys were talking about this weekend. I don't know the metrics on it, so I can't go anymore. I'll just take their word on it. But here's some stats in SEC play for the hitters that stand out. 22 of 25 in steals. That puts a lot of pressure on defenses. Teams, by the way, fielding 963 against them. I don't know how much that is. They're facing some crappy defensive teams. Mississippi State for sure would be one of those. Or how much of that is you just put so much pressure on other teams. I think that's got to be a factor, especially with the Bradfield and some guys who can run in there. Let's see, anybody? Bradfield's 10 of 11 in steals. Nobody else has stolen more than 2 in the league except for Hewitt, who's 3 for 3. They've got a 436 on base percentage in league games. On base percentage is the most important offensive stat in baseball. That's elite. And they are striking out 84 times to 64 walks. That is also a pretty exceptional number. And then again, that's also in SEC games.
Yeah, and overall, if you look at the numbers, Vanderbilt has stolen about 25 more bases overall in overall games. I mean, Vanderbilt's 54-67 in stolen bases. In South Carolina, their numbers are about 20 off that. So definitely, teams, you look at, that's definitely something teams have to prepare for. They were talking about, how do you prepare for Bradfield? What do you got to do? You got to vary your looks. You've got to be able to throw over, make good pickoff moves, make him work for it. That's kind of the book as always on Bradfield, but you got to keep him off base first of all, because with those numbers, he's 25 to 29. Which is, again, a few more caught stealing than he's had in the past. But those are mainly weeks ago when that happened. And he's been picked off a few times too, but you got to keep him off first. And that was the problem earlier on the year, that Bradfield wasn't getting to the position of walking or getting base hits or getting on first to steal bases. And then when he did, he had a little trouble there for about a week or two when he got caught. But I think you're going to see some things on display this weekend. Mainly, South Carolina's power numbers. Is Vanderbilt going to be able to contain them, hold them at bay? Vanderbilt's speed, Vanderbilt's offensive output, obviously. And then I think the storyline of the games this weekend, too, are going to be how will the two teams, depending if Holton pitches, how will the two teams adjust pitching-wise with undoubtedly right now the Vanderbilt's Friday night starter if he doesn't go. And as of this podcast, this podcast, I don't think we know that. And then with South Carolina, as I mentioned, not having their team leader in wins and Noah Hall. That's how that's played out, I think, are key components this weekend, all those things I mentioned.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if we saw Carter Holton this weekend. Now, I do think we will see him against Tennessee, but any parting thoughts on Vanderbilt baseball that we've not gotten into?
No, I just think this team continues to be consistent. Last weekend, a little bump in the road and a little chink in the armor that the game two, and unusual when you've been programmed to winning this many games in a row and a team hits a walk-off on you. And but they adjusted well on Saturday. I keep wanting to say Sunday, these Thursday, Friday, Saturday games, the game three, and held Missouri at bay. So nothing to panic about. But I think this weekend's a true test. These next 6 are going to be really big, but they're all big, and need to have a big crowd out the Hawk cheering these guys on because they're playing some good baseball. They're putting it together still, and we'll just see how good South Carolina is. Again, we saw them 1-1 against LSU, who is one in the country. So you got a team in South Carolina playing 2 back-to-back weekends against top 4 or 5, depending on what poll you look at, and sizing them up. Albeit they got to go on the road this weekend to play us here, but I'm interested to see how they are. I'm interested to see how Cassis does coming home after what he's going to be doing, and seeing if we can hold balls in the ballpark, if our pitching staff can keep them at bay, and because they do have some undoubtedly power numbers that are matched by very few in the country right now, and seeing if we can hold them at bay and get some more victories here in Nashville.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I've never done this before. Give me a pick for the weekend.
Pick for the weekend, I think Vanderbilt takes it 2 out of 3. There'll be close games. Which game I think they take, I'm not going to get into that. I think the Sunday favors Vanderbilt, I think, with as far as if you go with pitching depth and the number of power arms. I think the Sunday game just probably – and Sunday's kind of the grab-all game in this league. You see a lot of crazy scores, but I'm going to take Vanderbilt 2 out of 3. But I think there'll be close games. I don't think there'll be blowouts either way. Very important to get that game won. And, there have been some talk, and if you're not going Holton Friday, there's been some talk about, from some that I talked to, why don't you just bump everybody up? And if you're going to go Cunningham, why don't you just bump everybody up 1? And Saturday starter goes to Friday, Sunday starter goes, Futrell goes Saturday, and then you pitch and I don't know what you think about that. But we're talking about a man who's a creature of habit. Do you mess with then you're all of a sudden you're messing with the schedule of the other 2 pitchers rather than just changing it for 1. I'm not sure your thoughts on that, but if Holton doesn't go on Friday, what do you think about that as far as moving by everybody up 1?
Well, look, you're the guy who pitched in college, and I'm not. But I'm guessing that if it's literally just for 1 more week that he misses, that he's back next weekend, which is what I heard Friday night last week. Then I think you probably don't mess with that and move guys up because it probably messes with their rests and their bullpen days and whatever. I don't know how fragile that ecosystem of arms is, but to me, I don't think I make a change unless what I got was wrong and Holton is out for beyond this weekend, and that extends into next week and beyond. You tell me.
Yeah, because if it is something, I think it'll tell us a lot. If they did that, then it tells you that things are a lot worse with Carter Holton and whatever's ailing him. Because you're right, you want to get things back on track for the next weekend. So I can see it both ways. That Friday night game is so important in this league. It is so vital to get that game won, especially at home. There's almost a pressure for that home team to get that Friday night win. And so knowing Tim Corbin and knowing history here, I would think probably he'll keep it the same if Holton doesn't go, and he'll plug somebody in. They haven't named anybody, right? Is it just TBA? Is it?
I haven't seen yet. In fact, I'm going to check my email while we're doing this and see if the SEC has sent out anything for the weekend, or if Vanderbilt has for that matter. What's your confidence level in your answer? Would it be over or under 5.8%?
I know where you're going there. I don't know what 5.8% is.
I don't think anybody does.
No. But I doubt they haven't released it yet. They probably this afternoon. But
no, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. So if I'm guessing, I think they'll probably just keep it the same. But if they do move it, I think that tells you, because then again, it changes things for Knoxville next weekend. So, but I'm guessing, you put me on the spot, I say we take 2 out of 3 in 2 hard-fought wins and a third game that could go either way. But this team beat the Tigers, top-ranked team in the country, last weekend at home, and it was a big win for them. So they're coming in confident, and that's just the way I see it. Hope I'm right.
Chip, I know it is
conference wins and series wins. So 2 out of 3 is what I'm calling, and hope I'm right. We'll see you out the Hawk, hopefully.
All right. I know you may be in the real estate business. You may know a little bit about that. It's that time of year where people are buying and selling houses. All kinds of people are buying and selling houses and putting places on the market, Chip. What can you tell anyone who'd be interested in that kind of thing?
Well, our company, Frederick and Clark Realty, has been around for over 60 years. We've got 2 offices, one in Brentwood and one in Green Hills, and over 180 agents. And you mentioned, it is that time of year. It's a hot market. I read a story this weekend that was interesting about Nashville with the rising interest rates and the rising prices of homes. A lot of areas, when people moving into Nashville, are coming more popular than they have ever before. Some areas north of town, Madison, Whites Creek area, which is it's kind of becoming a growing area. You've got some areas, of course, Spring Hill, and those are the ones that, to people moving to Nashville, are the more affordable areas than living in the inner core. God didn't make more dirt than He did. There's no more dirt. You used to, all your dirt and all that was in Williamson County, but with farms and all that got gobbled up with subdivisions. So there's no more dirt being made. So what do you got to do if you want to come to Nashville and live in the inner core? A lot of people are tearing down houses and doing rebuilds. So we had some interesting stories about that. Some nice homes that are older just getting leveled and people doing new builds on it because that's the only thing they can find. But my point is, if you need some help in moving to Nashville or selling your home, some of these areas of town that used to be areas that you wouldn't even think of living in just because they're distance to Nashville, they're becoming more popular than ever before. And we've got agents who know those areas that can help in your home search or your sell search as far as selling your home and moving somewhere else in Nashville or moving out of town. And that's where our agents come in handy. We've got 180 agents. As I mentioned, they're very experienced. They know all the areas in Middle Tennessee and would love to help you, whether you're buying or selling. So give me a call. You can call me personally at the office, 615-327-4800. Check us out on the web of the inventory. We've got search engines on our site that can give you, tell you how much your house is on your street. If you pass by a house, pass by one of our signs or our fellow partners in the Middle Tennessee area, we can find out what that house is worth, how many bedrooms, baths, the price, all that. And it's all on our website at frederickandclark.com. So give me a call personally, check us out on the web, and love to help you, help the listeners of this podcast for their home, their real estate needs, whatever they may be.
Thanks, Chip. We'll catch you next week.
Okay, Chris. Take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrislee70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, VandySports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at VandySports.com. Follow me at chrislee70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.